Hello and welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Lyndall Curtis. The Prime Minister's trying to find the money to fund the National Disability Insurance Scheme, but she also wants to enlist the help of those in the disability sector to put pressure on Western Australia and Queensland to sign up. Tony Abbott, the opposition leader, says on disability he's Dr. Yes. On electricity reform, however, the coalition is Dr. What about the carbon tax? While others, including a major business group, have welcomed the Prime Minister's proposals to reform the electricity sector. The states will talk to the Prime Minister on Friday and they continue to have some concerns about her proposals. Joining me to discuss the day are Liberal MP Scott Buchholz and Labor MP Nick Champion. Welcome to you both.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lyndall.
We'll start with electricity reform and the reaction from the coalition.
What I do know is if we got rid of the carbon tax, we would save over $300 a year for each family. What I do know, to take it on the chin, is the renewable energy targets. Yes, they're a bipartisan position. They also force up the price of power. But it's disingenuous for the Prime Minister to come out after she's made such a debacle out of the carbon tax and say now the solution is there. The solution is to stop putting in poles and wires, because these are actually the items that get the power around.
Scott, do you accept that while the carbon price has put up electricity costs, they've been going up higher and for longer for other reasons?
Yeah, there's actually two pushes on upward pressure on carbon price. One's obviously the tax, and the other one, as Barnaby alluded to then, is the cost component associated with the infrastructure to run the power. Now, here in Queensland, that cost burden has been amplified by the fact that in 2006 through to 2008, the then previous Labor administration went through and raped about $1.7 billion out of the infrastructure funds of both Ergon and Energex, which they had put away to fund those infrastructure programs.
So do you think the states should have a discussion with the Prime Minister, or they will have a discussion? Do you think the states should sign up to at least some of the proposals the Prime Minister's put forward?
Oh, well, I think the states are looking forward to having a discussion. I think they're sick of hearing little political grabs in the media by the Prime Minister with reference to what they should and shouldn't be doing. I got off the phone from our Energy Minister here in Queensland a couple of hours ago, who said he was in discussions with the Prime Minister, with all the ministers, not 2 weeks ago, and not one mention of this. And it's a little disingenuous from our Prime Minister now to be making statements in the public when when these guys are just waiting to find out what the government's position is and where the money's going to come from to fund this.
Now, Nick, is the gold plating the Prime Minister talks about investment to deal with peak demand, or is there an issue that if peak demand isn't catered for, there could be blackouts or brownouts in the future?
Well, I think we don't obviously want an electricity system with brownouts or blackouts, so that would be problematic. But you can reduce demand on those 4 days per year, and that's by targeting very big users of electricity, and obviously by empowering consumers to make better choices in terms of when they turn things on and off. And obviously we want to work with the states on this issue, but people have got to remember that it is the states who play a very big hand in the electricity market, both through state-based regulation and also through the ownership of generators. And we've got to make sure that those states, which do have sometimes a vested interest in gold-plating power infrastructure, don't stand in the way of consumers getting a better deal. We've got a national electricity market, and we've got to make sure that that electricity market delivers for consumers. It
is the case, though, that at least two of the large states where there are issues, Queensland and New South Wales, are also troubled by the rising electricity prices. Is there a basis for an agreed solution?
Well, it's hard to be both poacher and gamekeeper, and I think that's the position of both of those states. Queensland and New South Wales own significant public assets in the electricity generation and poles and wires, and so there's always going to be, I suppose, an element of, on one hand, they say they want lower power prices for consumers, but on the other hand they benefit sometimes out of the rules which allow generators and the owners of poles and wires to gold plate their networks. We want a national electricity market that works. We want one that works for consumers. The Prime Minister's plans will lower the cost of electricity by about $250 per year per family. These are good reforms and the state government should sign up to them.
If I could ask both of you this question, because both of you come from states that can get uncomfortably hot at the height of summer. First to you, Scott, how hard or easy do you think it is for particularly consumers to lower their power usage on the peak times, the times when they might really look to things like air conditioning to help make their lives a little bit more comfortable?
Yeah, well, I mean, the carbon tax has only been in for a short amount of time. Prior to that, we have seen increases in energy costs here in the state of Queensland over a number of years. So the household budget has already been, putting efficient mechanisms in place with reference to monitoring of electricity prices, obviously upgrading to light bulbs to more efficient usages of power. So I suggest, to answer your question, a lot of those savings mechanisms may already be in place, and so in the absence of any major reform, there's not a lot of room left for the household budget to try and find those savings that you suggest may be out there.
And Nick, do you think there are things consumers can do on those, particularly at the peak times?
Well, look, I don't think the average pensioner can save much in terms of, you have to have the air conditioning running when it's hot. But I think there are a lot of households where they have the Wi-Fi on, where they have the big plasma TV, and they might have another TV in the other room that's on standby, where they might be doing their washing at the same time as peak energy prices are very high. And I also think there might be industrial users of electricity which might also be using power at that time. If you have peak pricing, then obviously consumers, whether they be companies and industrial consumers, or whether they be domestic consumers, will obviously pay attention to the price, and they might not do the washing during the middle of the day. They might wait a day to do it when it's cooler. Factories might structure their shifts so that they're not working on those days, and they'll make a consequent power saving. So I think if we introduce market mechanisms into this, then you'll be surprised about how much people can moderate demand.
We might move on now to the question of disability. The Prime Minister says the federal government needs to find savings across government programs to help fund the National Disability Insurance Scheme. She gave a speech today to Disability Services chief executives and was interrupted by a woman in a wheelchair who said the lack of financial support for people with disabilities has forced her to steal.
We really need you to talk to us, and I promise you we will be listening.
Prime Minister, are you aware that disability pension is nearly 57% of national minimum wage? I am permanently wheelchair bound and incontinent after school bullying drove me to suicide. The pension alone does not even cover my ongoing medical needs and appointments, to the point I had to go to the local rehab centre and literally steal disposable continent supplies to be able to manage 2 nights here in Sydney.
Okay, well, we're listening, and what I can do is ask a staff member who is here, Robin, to speak to you. But I would say this, I'm proud to lead the government that made an historic difference to the level of the disability support pension.
When it comes to the National Disability Insurance Scheme, I am Dr. Yes. I am Dr. Yes. And yes, we will, from time to time, ask questions about exactly what the government is doing, exactly what their funding commitment is, exactly how these things are going to work out in practice. But we are there to help. We are not there to carp.
Nick, is it possible to make cuts in the budget on top of cuts you've already made that don't hurt some people in order to help others?
Well, budgets are always about priorities, and you do have to make the right priorities, and obviously most Australians would expect us to put in place a level of disability services that allows people to live with some dignity. This area has been traditionally underfunded by state governments. They've ignored it for generations sometimes, and the disability sector and disabled people have suffered in silence. And I guess we're now starting to see a lot of those voices coming to the fore. I think what we've got to do is see how the trial goes, because we've got these four or five trials running across the country. That'll give us a good idea about what the costs actually will be. There's a lot of, I guess, speculation about what it might cost the federal budget, and we've got to find out exactly how much a disability sector will, NDIS will cost us before we start, until we have a figure we know we need to fund. It's not just a matter of putting in place the funding, it's also about making efficiencies to what's currently there and making sure that we have a system that actually gives disabled people value for money, because there's no good pouring money in the top if it doesn't get down to the grassroots level.
Scott, Tony Abbott was making very supportive statements about the National Disability Insurance Scheme today. Queensland and Western Australia are yet to come on board with the scheme. Do you think Mr Abbott can convince the Liberal National Party premiers of those states?
It's not for the Tony Abbott to try and convince the states. It's up to the government to open and frank dialogue with the states to try and convince them. With reference to the costing of the NDIS, the Productivity Commission have tabled their reports, which says the funding is going to be in the vicinity around $7 billion for that program. That's roughly around the opportunity cost foregone that we lose with our interest payment as a nation. The coalition is dead set committed to the NDIS. I mean, that poor lady that we heard there earlier on interrupt the Prime Minister. We shouldn't have those comments being made here in Australia, and it's and I think that's why we've got both sides of government who are dead set committed to trying to address the situation that's before us with the NDIS.
Joe Hockey, though, has previously said that he's not going to make commitments on something he can't fund. Do you believe that both sides of politics can find the money, because this scheme will be phased in over a long period of time?
Well, yeah, Joe makes a valid comment. I mean, unless we get an idea of where we are with the books, I mean, I tell you what's not going to work. What's not going to work is that the federal government stands up there and says, well, we're going to kick in $1 billion to something that's going to cost around $7. But that $1 billion is just for the launch sites. It's not for the whole scheme. Well, that's good, because I was under the understanding that the federal government was going to ask the states to go and kick in. But if that's not the case, I'm sure the states will be a lot happier knowing that they're not going to have to cut funding programs that already exist to then make way for a federal government program that's going to be railroaded over the top of them.
And finally, Nick, your government also has to find money for education reforms in a much shorter time frame. Are you confident that can be done?
Well, the key thing is, and our key priority has always been to keep the economy growing during this period of world financial instability. Australia's economy has kept on growing, and we've kept unemployment low, and we've kept interest rates low, and we've kept people in work, and that's the key bit. If you do what Scott says and go into recession, you won't get anywhere, and you won't fund any program for any social service at all.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. I'm very sorry, Scott, we've run out of time, but Nick Champion and Scott Buchholz, thank you very much for your time. And thank you for joining Capitol Hill. Please be with us at the same time tomorrow. Good night.